Okay, we are recording. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Quincy Public Schools Parent Academy. And this Parent Academy this evening is for families and caregivers that have children in grades 3 through 8. You're in for quite a treat tonight. We're going to be talking a lot about how to support you with your child's, or if you have more than one child, their literacy development. So my name is Bridget Vaughan. I'm the coordinator for the district for literacy, and I'm joined tonight by Victoria Mulkern from the National Center for Improving Literacy. Um, I also need to let you know about a couple of things. Um, so we are recording this session. So if you know any families that were not able to make it tonight, this will be on our Parent Academies page on our QPS website. And also we have interpreters available in Spanish, Portuguese, Chinese is actually Cantonese tonight. And because of the Zoom capability, we do have a Mandarin translator, and that's in the Korean channel. So if you need that channel, that's under Korean for Mandarin. And if anyone else has any questions about that, you can put that in the chat. So let me just check the chat. Okay. So Caroline has a question in the Spanish interpretation channel. So just give me a moment. I will correct that. Okay, one moment, please. There we go. I'm going to add Caroline for a Spanish interpreter again. Okay, we should be all set with that. I also want to let you know that we have a book raffle tonight. So in just a few moments, once we get started, I'm going to put in the chat a Google form, and it just has some brief information if you could fill it out, and then we can send some books home with your children. So we're going to get started. Again, I said the topic this evening is supporting your child's literacy development. We're so happy to have you because we want to support you. We want to give you the tools to support your children in improving their literacy skills and developing a true love of reading. So I've met many of your wonderful children as I go through classrooms, and I see all of the amazing learning that is happening. But I don't always get to meet you. So I'm so glad that you could join us. Um, so I'm a certified associate by the Academy of Wharton Gillingham. Literacy is my passion. I also teach children's literature and writing at the college level. And I've been working for the Quincy Public Schools for several years as a teacher and as a literacy coordinator. And I wanted in just a moment turn this over to our presenter this evening, Victoria Mulkern. We're so thankful for our partnership with NCIL, the National Center for Improving Literacy. Victoria is a doctoral student in educational studies, and she has a concentration in special education at Boston University Wheelock College of Education and Human Development. Victoria's research interests include supporting educators in implementing multi-tiered systems of support in reading to provide evidence-based literacy practices for all students, especially young multilingual learners who may be at risk for dyslexia and other word reading disabilities. Victoria has so much to share with you over the next hour, so sit back and enjoy. I'm going to hand it over to Victoria, and I'm also going to put that book raffle in the chat for you to fill out, but there's no rush to do it, so you'll have the next hour to do that. So I will hand it over to Victoria. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Bridget, and welcome all. Thank you for being here, especially on a very, very cold, very dark Tuesday night. It's so nice to see so many caregivers here where we can all learn together to support our students' literacy. Um, Bridget, could I possibly just share my screen? And
Absolutely.
while
Absolutely.
While we do that, um, I will also put my slides in the chat. So, if you're at home and you're a visual learner like I am, you can follow along with us as we go. As Bridget noted, I am currently a doctoral student at Boston University. Previously, I've spent many roles in school districts. I was a special educator. I was an ESL teacher. I was an instructional coach, all in the Boston Public Schools. Before I got to BU, I was a literacy administrator as well. So I've seen all levels of the system. I've worked with students in all ages, K through now the college age. And so I'm really excited to talk to you all tonight about your students in grades 3 to 8, because sometimes we talk a lot about early literacy and we talk a lot about gearing up our students for literacy as they get into college and post-secondary life. But these years are really important too. So it's great to have you all here with us, so we can talk about your students and supporting them through every aspect of the journey. As Bridget mentioned, I'm as part of being at Boston University, we are the center for the primary institution for the National Center on Improving Literacy. We're a center that's funded partially by the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education, as well as the Office of Special Education. So it's a really nice partnership where our focus is to increase access to and use of evidence-based approaches to screen, identify, and teach toddlers up to grade 12 children for word reading difficulties and literacy related difficulties such as dyslexia. But even larger, we're here to support literacy practices both at home, at school, in the community of all our students. And that includes both our really proficient readers as well as our striving readers. So that's what we're here for today, is to support the literacy development of all of your children and to help you in increasing your awareness of different practices that you can utilize at home as you partner with your child and their schools and their teachers to support their literacy development, both in terms of their oral language, their written language, and so forth. If you're engaging with them in homework and just in their overall love of reading as we're building that in these years. We're also going to see how we can engage in practices to increase their conversations, their speaking, as well as their writing, and their being kind of critical consumers of media, which is a new form of literacy that we're all kind of diving into in this modern era, especially in a post-COVID era. And so we're going to start, though, with thinking about how we engage our students in increased oral language and conversations, because oral language is the bedrock of literacy development. And students need both spoken language and written language to be able to learn how to read. And even as students have what we call broken the code, they can read those words off the page in these grade levels. We still need to support them in building that oral language, because the more words they hear and the more complex language structures that they're using in day-to-day life is going to help them as they get into these more complicated and more complex chapter books, textbooks that they have to read for school in these grades. And so that's why there's a real reciprocal relationship between the spoken language and the written language. And we want to continue that in these grades. It's crucial for students in the early elementary years, but still really, really key for students as they get into these upper elementary and middle school grades. And so when you're thinking about having conversations around the home with your children, this is what I love about oral language is that it's very no prep or little prep and no materials. It's just really organic, what you would do at the home, but thinking about how you're talking with your child and engaging them in conversation. There's never too much talking for our children to be engaging in. You may think that some days after you've had a long day of work, but really, if you can be engaging in that back and forth with your children about anything they want to talk about, you're building their vocabulary of the world, their understanding of structures of how we talk, of dialogue, that there's a back and forth of turn taking. You can talk, you don't have to ask them what they learned in their science class or in their math class. You can just ask them how their day was, what they did during their recess, who their friends are in class, what they're, hoping to do after school. That's going to help them see that more expansive language is really key. In a world where students are on their phones a lot or on devices a lot, looking eye to eye with other human beings, whether they're an adult, whether they're a sibling, a friend, is really key, so that we're engaging them in that turn taking, in that back and forth, and that they see it's not just a bubble that appears on their text message screen. And the more you can discuss the information they're bringing to you, is really powerful for all students. You can think of this in another way. Sometimes we talk about this in terms of thin versus thick conversations. And we always want thick conversations with children as we're developing their oral language. Thin conversations are what we typically see in a dialogue. We ask a child a question, how was school? They respond, good. And we respond, okay. The conversation usually ends at that. Typically 3 back and forths, an adult, a child, an adult, and that's it. When we're thinking about thick conversations, we're seeing how we can extend or expand what a child is saying to get to at least 5 back and forths. Research has shown us that while most conversations are only 3 back and forths, really the key to developing students' language development is engaging them in as many 5 back and forth conversations as possible. So, as you ask, and thinking about how we can ask, more open-ended conversations, saying, oh, I noticed it was cold out. Did that impact how did you go to recess today? The child might say, yep. Oh, what did you do at recess? And then the child has to respond, oh, well, we played inside, or we went to the gym, or the gym teacher came up. And then the adult, that 5th turn taking, saying, oh, you went to the gym, and you could engage in even another question to that. Oh, you went to the gym. Did you play basketball or soccer? And engaging them a little bit more, affirming what they said or clarifying what they said, to make it a thick conversation. Because in this age group, it's really supporting their complex thinking, and it's having children kind of expand their vocabulary and maybe even use some words that they hear you using, some more what we would call a multisyllabic word, those longer words. And so there are different, activities you can do with children to promote their oral language. We're just going to watch a quick clip of one activity you can do. And this is called naming. And I did have it set for us. My apologies. And this is an activity, if you have younger kids at home, you can engage with them too. But for this age group, I want you to think how we can build upon that for children, and we'll get there.
It's related to different topics and categories. By naming items in categories, you help the students organize their language for better retrieval. You might have your students name fruits. For example, have them name fruits that are red, fruits that are green, and fruits that are yellow. Your students can name fruits that are big and round and fruits that are small and round. You want to keep the naming brisk. If your students can't name many items in a category, you name some items and have them repeat as many as they can remember. Choose a topic for naming that coordinates with the book you're reading with your students. Let's name some berries. Raspberry, blueberry, boysenberry. Job. Let's name some melons. Watermelon, antelope, honeydew. Honeydew, yeah. I'm going to say a sentence and I want you to repeat it after me. An apple is red and a plum is purple. An apple is red and a plum is purple. Good. Now you try a sentence. An orange is orange and an apple is red. Good job. Another activity.
And so as you can see, that's a very basic kind of iteration of how we would engage in a naming process with students. As your students are getting up through the grade levels, you can expand on that into what we call build their schema of the world or the topic. Building students' background understanding of what they're going to be engaging in or what they're reading about is really important. I often say I once had a student, we were talking about the solar system, and I didn't build enough background knowledge, but I showed them, this word sonic and about the word. And I get through my whole lesson thinking I'm talking about a solar system. And all my student could think about was the fast food chain Sonic. And so that was his background knowledge of the world when I needed to kind of build that, even if it was orally for my students saying, oh, we can see Sonic is connected to the solar system. The solar system is all about the planets and the stars and the moon. And that could even be just my oral language with them. Another kind of iteration, we would say, of this naming activity could be as students are getting into those bigger words where they see big word parts such as like prefixes and suffixes, and asking a child, ooh, this word says unfriendly. Let's think of other words. Let's name other words with un in them. Or if we're talking about ing at the end, that's the verb. We're doing something like playing. How many other words can we name with ing at the end? Playing, running, jumping, dancing, singing, and that helps students understand and hear those parts of words that they're going to see over and over again and be starting to read over and over again too. Okay. And then we're going to transition that just talking about events, about anything in the world, to what your children are reading as they bring home books that they're reading at school, as they're finding books that interest them. You can also, even if you're not reading the book with them, as we'll kind of transition into later, if there are books you read with them, but even if you aren't reading a particular book with them, you can still ask them questions about the book they're reading, such as identifying the key ideas in the book, asking them to, kind of prove what they're reading about by showing you key details or a sentence in the book that supports them, helping them understand if they bring to you, this word was weird, helping them understand the definition of a word, and always supporting them if they feel like they're getting frustrated or the reading is difficult. And again, we want to make sure we're trying to ask students questions that expand to more than just yes or no, but having them explain their thinking. I have a few examples of questions here, such as, you could ask, what's the author trying to say, do you think? Why do you think, and especially in our upper elementary and middle school grades, when we're getting into more complex sentence structures and phrases, you can ask the students, your children, why do you think the author used that phrase or that word, or or, use the words in that order in that sentence. That's different to me. These are questions that you can engage your child with as they can expand their thinking and understanding of what they're reading. And these are just some sentence stems that you can refer back to, that you can always kind of go to when you're asking a student about a book they're reading. You could say, what questions would you ask the author if you were in that situation? Or what was the problem in this chapter, in this story? Or in your mind, how would you do this if you were a character? These are some quick resources for you to go back to in your own time to think about how you're engaging your students in thick and thin conversations, how you're engaging your children in developing their conversational skills, that back and forth process, as well as ways to engage them in higher order thinking. As I kind of previewed, you can have your conversations with children about anything, about events, about what they did in their day, about things at home. But really, when we're talking about, literacy, we also want to think about engaging with your child about the texts that they're reading, about their homework, about the books that they're reading for school or the books that they're reading for interest. And you can read with them. We often think about reading with your child when they're in the really young preschool, kindergarten grades, as they're reading storybooks or picture books. But even as your children get into the upper elementary and middle school grades, you can engage in the same book with your child. They may be a lot more interesting for you too, as they're engaging in some chapter books. You can read a chapter with them. You could also be showing them that you're interested in the topic that they're reading about. By reading with your child, you're showing them what a model of good reading looks like. You're going to help them learn out new words, new phrases, kind of point out how our language works, and discuss different ideas that they're coming across as they read. And reading with your child can promote their literacy development, especially if they're struggling with their reading currently, and if they, are more what we call reluctant readers. You can point out what, a model reader might look like, but also different ways that you can support your child at home. So we're just going to watch a quick video to kind of see from Dr. Jean Wanzik about how we support our children with reading at home.
Yeah, I think at home, it's really important to focus on your child's strengths as well as their weaknesses. It's easy when students are struggling or our children are struggling to think about their weaknesses, but really celebrate their strengths and do things that, continue to build on those strengths. And one of the most important things you can do is to read with and to your child and make reading enjoyable at home. And that can be, reading to them, reading with them, audiobooks, and really discussing that and making it enjoyable. Talk about the interesting words that are in the books, what the words mean, what's happening in the story or the information that's being given. What is the author trying to convey to the reader through this book or through this text? And really, having discussions with your child about books and really making it an enjoyable experience. And children who receive really good, effective instruction in school and find reading enjoyable become successful readers and can think critically about the text and really can thrive in those environments.
So as you heard Dr. Wanzik say, we can really help affirm children in anything they're reading, and building that enthusiasm and motivation for reading if we're reading that with them and hoping to develop that love of reading, which is obviously the end goal. Reading a book can be so interactive with your child, especially if you're engaging in that oral language and conversation with them. And it can be, even if it's engaging in graphics. A lot of our kids like comic books or magazines, and helping them realize that that's reading too, that they should feel good about that if that's what they choose to read at home. That, picking out words that they see or understand. And even if your child's a reluctant reader, using audiobooks and informing them that that's also reading. Listening to an audiobook can also count as reading, and that they can feel like superstar readers if they're reading a lot of audiobooks or even podcasts nowadays. It can also be really nice to mix up the different types of texts you're reading together with your child. A lot of students love fiction, which is books about like stories and characters, although there are so many students who love nonfiction or informational books because they love to learn about the world. They're so curious. And it's making sure that students get a nice mix of both. They do get a mix of both at school too, but on their own, it's nice to mix it up. It's just all about finding what really piques a child's interest. And so again, they can be both stories and informational texts. The types of questions you may ask your child as you're reading together may differ depending on the type of book you're reading with them. If it's more of a fiction story text, you're asking more about the character or the place or setting, we call it, that the story took place in, the kind of sequence of events that happened, a problem or a solution. And helping your child really critically think about the story and not just kind of retell questions, but engaging them in maybe inferential questions like as, what would you have done if you were the character? Or what else could a character have done if in that same scenario? Whereas if you're engaging a child in an informational text, a nonfiction text, something about the world, whether it's about trains or dinosaurs or events in history, you really want to engage students in the different ways that the text is laid out. There may be headings, there may be images, it may be, written in the third person as opposed to the first person in a fiction or narrative text, and engaging your child in the facts that they learned about and building up their knowledge about the world. Another tip, and this is so crucial, and I can't emphasize this enough. I've had so many, caregivers over the years come and ask me, my child is learning in English and I feel like I should engage in book reading with them in English, but I'm more, comfortable in another language. Should I read to them in English? The answer is no. You should engage in reading with your child in whatever language you are most comfortable with too, because that's also showing them that you love to read and you're comfortable in that. Of course, it's great to read in English. They're getting a lot of reading in English at school with their homework, but it's also wonderful to develop their biliteracy, multiliteracy at home, and bringing those wonderful connections that you can make between English and your home language if you speak another language at home. But please, please, please do not feel like you need to not read in your home language and only read in English. There's nothing more powerful than multiliteracy for our students. And so again, find that nice place, that routine with your child where you can read with them, and engage with your child to pick something around their interests. We often talk about helping students find, books that, are mirrors to them, that, have characters or have life events that reflect their own experiences, as well as windows. So they're looking out and learning about something else, whether it's a different culture than what they've grown up in or different experiences. In Quincy, it's a city. And so maybe it's learning about the countryside or different rural areas, giving them information about cultures or about countries outside of the United States, helping them see both themselves as mirrors in the text they read, as well as those those windows, that give them more perspective on things other than their lives. And I know Quincy has done a lot of work with this, so they hear a lot about this, or their educators hear a lot about this, and incorporating both mirrors and windows in their professional development and their learning. And finally, we want to make sure that we're keeping it fun for kids. They do a lot of reading and writing at school, and when we're at home, we want to make sure we're spurring that love of reading for our children. And again, when we're thinking about helping our children understand what is read, the questions we might ask may be different in fiction text versus nonfiction text. But we also want to make sure we're asking those WH questions, those who, what, where, when, why, as well as, again, expanding their responses so that they're kind of thick responses as opposed to one word or two word responses with our children. And as they're getting into these upper grades, we want to, as we're building our students' vocabulary, we can stop and ask, what did that author use this word? What does it mean? Can you give me an example of what it means? Can you give me a synonym for what it means, or an antonym for what it means? And helping to build their understanding of the words that authors use. You can ask questions both before, during, and after reading for your child. And while these questions, overall may be the same, the types of questions you're asking may be a little different depending on when you're asking them. For example, if you're asking your child questions before they start reading, it might be what we call like a preview or like a book walk of what may be to come. It might be a lot of prediction questions. You might be looking at the book cover, or you might be looking at the title of a chapter. Or if it's chapter book, might be going back to the last few lines of the previous chapter and saying, what do you think's going to happen in this chapter as we read today? Or, let's read the title. Does anything seem similar? It's a lot of predicting. It's kind of getting our children ready for reading. Whereas during reading, you might be engaging them in those, picking out those words or phrases and asking some quick questions about what that means to help check their understanding as they're going, so that you can pause if you feel like they're getting off track. For example, I have here, if you pick out the word exhausted, you can say, that's a word, exhausted. Exhausted means to feel so tired, you can hardly move. And you can even use some body language to explain it even more. And then you can ask them, what's the word again? And they would say, exhausted. You could even expand on this even more by having your child say a sentence about, or respond to a sentence about when they're exhausted, or give a recall about a time that they were really exhausted. They may say, I was so exhausted after I ran all around the field at gym class today. And you could say, yeah, you were exhausted. And then going back to the text. After reading, you want to make sure that you're helping your child think about what they just read. If it's a fiction text, you might ask them, what was the story about? What was the problem? How did the characters solve that problem? If it's an informational text, you might say, what was that page about? Or, how did the pictures or the tables help you understand what the text was? These are all questions that you can ask your child after reading to wrap up. And these are just some quick, again, resources, both from our National Center on Improving Literacy, as well as other State Department of Education centers, to help you as you're thinking about how to engage your child in reading. We sometimes call it dialogic reading when we're engaging with our child in book reading, because it's similar to a dialogue we're having. So dialogic between two people. And there's a quick, nice resource here on the process of dialogic reading. And it's a quick one-pager, and it just, again, gives you some different strategies or of different questions you could ask to your child and engaging with them in the dialogue over time. As your child is reading, you may be reading a book with them, helping them engage in the comprehension of the book, but we also want to develop their fluency, their reading fluency. And fluency is kind of a triangle of three things. It's their ability to read words and sentences correctly, their ability to read them with a proper rate, so speed, so not too slow or not too fast, and then ability to read it with expression, so how we would talk. So it's those three things together that form that triangle of fluency. And reading fluency is really connected to students' reading comprehension. Because if students are spending so much time reading words, reading phrases, reading sentences, they're going to be spending so much of their brain energy doing that they're not devoting enough to actually comprehending what they're reading. On the other side, if students are reading so fast, they're speed reading, as I call it, they're really not taking enough time to let the ideas sink in their head. So it's always that Goldilocks area that we're always trying to get to. Not too slow, not too fast, but making sure that they're reading it correctly with sounding out the words, reading the phrases, and so forth. When we're talking about spoken language and written language, fluency is that bridge between the two, because it's their oral reading and it's connecting it to what they know from their phonics, their print awareness, and also the comprehension. Students in these grades are especially always building their fluency, but when you're reading at home with your child, you can make sure that you're modeling fluent reading too. And as you know, adult, mostly proficient readers, I'm sure you kind of don't even think about reading fluency because it just comes natural to you, but it is something that students have to develop over time. So it's sometimes really nice to be conscious of the steady pace you're reading at, and to slow down your child if you feel like they're going too fast, like they're starting to read and not stopping or pausing at periods or commas, and reminding them that, they can take a breath after they read a sentence, or kind of slow down after they see commas, how they're going to use their voice, raise their voice as they see a question mark at the end of a word or an exclamation mark. Point those out for your children if they're, seeming to kind of breeze right through them. With reading fluency, we want to make sure that the text is to a sufficient degree, difficult for them, not too difficult so that they're taking so much time to read the words, but not too easy either, so that they're more inclined to go really fast. It should be, in a space that they're typically reading in. Sometimes we call it like a grade level text, a text that they're going to see at school that they're reading. And you can also show them that you read like you talk. You're not reading like it's not a race for students, but you read like you talk. You stop, you think, you kind of continue reading. There's a strategy. This is called partner reading. And you can do this in a few different ways. This image I really like because it shows kind of the three different ways that you can engage in partner reading with your child, from least support to most support, if we're looking from left to right on the screen. So if you have a book chapter or a page or even just a short passage that you're reading with your child, the least support of partner reading would be you take a turn reading a paragraph, your child takes their turn reading the next paragraph on the page, and then you would go and read the subsequent paragraph, and you keep going. That's the least support, because the child hasn't heard what they're reading before. Kind of the middle area of support is this middle diagram where you're doing what we call choral reading. You're both reading the same paragraph or the same page at the same time. And this is supportive to the child because they're able to follow along with your pace of reading. This is an especially good strategy if your child is kind of accurately reading the words, but needs to work on their pace of reading at either like speeding up or slowing down. So you're modeling that really fluent reading for them. On the right-hand side, we have our most support, which is when you as the more proficient reader read the first paragraph, and then you have your child read that exact same paragraph. So they've heard you read it already. They have some understanding. They follow along as you read, and then they try to read as well. We call this echo reading because your child is reading almost like an echo to you. These are all great ways to help your child build their fluency and engage in partner reading. And it's really fun for your children as well. And building reading habits in these years are really crucial for students. So this is just an example of a quick video that we're going to show in how you can build your students.
Doug.
Whoa, Limu! We're in a parade!
What does a fluent reader in 4th grade look like? Have you heard your 4th grader read lately? At this age, they'll probably be reading pretty smoothly and at a speed that doesn't get in the way of them understanding what they read.
While I was still a baby, my father washed me and fed me and changed my diapers and did all the millions of other things a mother normally does for her child.
You'll probably see them correct themselves as they read, or needing help with pronunciation. Each kid will sound a little differently as they read.
Early methods used by miners to keep the tunnels from caving didn't always work.
I think that all the love he had felt for my mother when she was alive, he now lavished upon me.
A smooth reader still has to understand, so make sure after they've read a bit that you can tell that they're understanding what they read.
What can you infer about what his relationship is, Danny's relationship is with his dad?
I think that he really likes his dad because he works all day with the shop and stuff, and then he works at the filling station, and his dad has raised him his whole life, so he's pretty much been taken care of.
So how do you know if your child's on track? Well, come summer, 4th graders who read fluently read more complex texts smoothly and with some expression. Read at a natural speed, self-correct mistakes as they go, and don't just read the words. They understand what they read.
And that video is targeted mostly to 4th graders, but those last few bullets there are true of all students in these kind of grade spans. That's what we want to see. We want students to be reading the words accurately, be reading with a nice pace, and comprehending what they read, thinking about what they read as well. And these are, again, some resources for you to look at from our National Center on Improving Literacy, as well as the Meadow Center, which is a wonderful research center out of the University of Texas that gives you a little bit more info on that partner reading process that I kind of demonstrated for you. It's a little bit more intense with a more complex text. And as you're engaging your child in fluent reading, we've been talking about this all along, but we want to engage our child to be motivated to read. And, that can feel hard when they do a lot of reading at school. And therefore, we want to make sure, again, we're making it as fun as possible for them, that we're following their lead, that we're reading with them how they want to read, whether it's orally, whether it's listening to audiobooks, whether it's reading informational texts, and being able to separate the reading for school that they have to do versus the reading for fun. I read for pleasure because I enjoy it, because it's fun. Sometimes it's modeling that for them. Such as listening to, again, audiobooks, podcasts. I read a lot, but I am a huge audiobook and podcast person. I read while I'm in the car. I read while I'm walking outside, and you can model that for your child. Or find, again, those graphic novels, comic books to help promote a love of reading in your child. And we want to promote not only a love of reading, but a love of writing as well, because reading and writing are reciprocal, processes that we want to develop strong readers and strong writers. And while they're getting this explicit writing instruction at school with their teachers, we can also support that writing instruction at home. And just like we want to model, good reading, we can model good writing as well, such as writing regularly yourself. And that doesn't have to be writing these, papers like a child would be reading, but writing down grocery lists, writing emails to family members, writing out letters or thank you notes that you have. Showing your child how writing is useful for grown-ups in life, that why we need writing and how it can be used in different formats is really, really important. We build students' writing by having them write more and more and more. So maybe if you're writing some thank you notes from the holiday season, you also want to encourage your child to write some notes along with you, build their writing, help them spur their interest in what they're writing about. Maybe they really like writing about poetry. Maybe they just learned about haikus in their classes and they want to engage in some more haikus. Maybe they want to write a story. If they have a younger sibling, maybe you could engage them in writing a book for their younger sibling, that they feel like they're the experts and they're teaching younger sibling. Or they could even be writing on the internet, how they use a search engine bar and seeing how that's writing. Or they could, engage in journaling, especially in this age group. Some children can start engaging in daily journaling or weekly journaling, holding that journal, whether it's a hard copy journal or an electronic journal, that they write down their hopes and thoughts and goals. That can be really motivating for students and help develop their writing at the same time. Students, I know at this age are starting to come home with assignments, especially writing assignments that they may have to engage in. And you may be wondering, how do I support my child with this writing assignment? I'm not a writing teacher. I don't know, what exactly they're learning about at school. And the best way to help is, again, by just asking around how you can help them. Help them brainstorm ideas. Think about it in terms of oral language, because students actually write better after they've talked about it orally a little bit, had some time to think, to share, and then put their thoughts down on paper. So you could help them brainstorm the ideas they have about their assignment. You could help them kind of pull some information from your own experiences. You could read the directions with them and help them set some must-dos, some bullets about what the assignment entails, how they can complete their assignment in the best way possible. And finally, how they can organize their ideas. That's really important at this stage in students' writing development, is how they use, whether it's through a graphic organizer, whether it's just a list in a notebook, how they're going to organize their idea for longer writing. And after students have been working on an assignment, we don't encourage, you taking the assignment and writing it for them. We want students to be writing it themselves, but you can be engaging them in these critical questions again, such as thinking about the accuracy of what they wrote, making sure that they're going back to edit, to add punctuation, capitalization, leaving space between their words. Identifying if it's a handwritten assignment, making sure that all the words they write are legible or able to be read, working on that handwriting, pointing out what you liked about it, the strengths of their writing, the organization of it, and maybe even how it could be improved, helping them think aloud, again, building in that oral language, thinking aloud, how your child can improve the passage. But really, again, as we're building their muscle to write, providing them with lots and lots of positive feedback and encouragement as they're doing it, because writing's hard. Writing takes a lot of our brain power to do. And so we should always be celebrating them for how they're writing. These again are some different guides to support you in supporting your children with writing at home. Especially the second bullet is from the NWEA, and it's a nice guide to support writing at home. It's a little bit more in depth, but if you're really interested, that's a good guide, as well as a shorter guide about developing spelling and writing at home. We've talked a lot about, just reading and writing, but we also can just develop a literacy-rich environment at home. And that, again, is by modeling great behaviors of reading and writing, but such as listening to stories, reading together, talking about ideas, but even just having different types of literature present, whether it's books, whether it's newspapers, magazines around the home, and showing them your excitement and engagement with literacy and with reading. And pointing out for them the different types of reading material. Students most commonly think of books, but showing them reading also, and types of reading material also are, magazines, newspapers, comics, articles, nowadays, blogs and websites, and sharing that with them. And sharing with them a love of going to the library. You have a beautiful library in Quincy, the Crane Library, and going there and showing them the beauty of a library card, and borrowing books, and bookstores, thrift stores, dollar stores, even yard sales, and borrowing from friends. And nowadays, getting books online too, or reading online, showing them the different places that you can see and find different reading materials. These again are some resources on how to, create that literacy-rich environment in your home through the different forms of reading and the different places that you can grab reading material from. As I mentioned, blogs, websites, online, like these are all new forms of reading material, newer for our children, and supporting them with this. We have to teach our children to be critical consumers of this, though, and encouraging them to really think about, is everything I'm reading online or on the internet true, accurate, and kind? And so we can be what we call media mentors, which, just like modeling fluent reading and a love of reading, it's modeling how you kind of go through reading online or finding material online, checking the sources, checking about the usefulness of the information. Students are getting a little bit at school too, but it's great to see it from you at home, that you're checking whether what you're reading is misinformation. And you can even kind of think aloud with your students about questions you want to ask about the media, such as, like, who is the author of this website or this web page? Who are they targeting? Who's their audience? Do I trust the source? Is it coming from just anybody from a blog post, or is it coming from a library or a school district or a university? Can I trust it? What are the qualifications of the author to be able to write this type of material? And thinking about that URL, that's a new literacy in and of itself, is thinking about the URL, thinking of if it's a .com, so maybe not as trustworthy, versus a .org or a .edu. Those are typically more trustworthy ending URLs to be directing students to, especially when it comes to assignments, such as writing assignments. And just due to time, I won't show this brief video, but again, being a media mentor is modeling for your child how we engage with digital platforms. I'm sure many of your students, are on their phones a lot, and that's fine. You can engage in many wonderful sites online on your phone. Research has shown that the majority of students actually gain more information. They pick up more information from reading hard copy literature rather than digitally on a screen. So I would always encourage you to limit your amount of time you have students reading or getting material off of a device, off of a phone, and encouraging those kind of hard copy, whether it's papers, books, and so forth. As well as that's kind of just helpful in knowing exactly what they're doing. But I also see the benefits that, the technology has provided with us and our children. Just to wrap up tonight in our last few minutes, these are just a few quick ways to support your child at home. Listen to the types of ideas they're reading about, how they're sounding out words, letters, and helping them, read, with more accuracy, more rate, with more expression. Look around and see what tasks are difficult. Is it more reading the words? Is it reading the words with a nice pace? Is it understanding or comprehending what they're reading from a story, from those questions that you're asking them? And always prompting them to go back and correct themselves. If you feel like they didn't read a word correctly or didn't answer a comprehension question correctly, have them go back in the text and check it out so that they can have success with it another time. And again, always encourage your child with what they're doing and remind them reading and writing is hard and they're doing a great job always by their effort. The material from this presentation tonight mainly came from our Supporting Your Child's Literacy Development at Home tutorial and infographics on our National Center on Improving Literacy website. I have it linked right here. You can see it at any time. All of the materials on our NCIL website are free, and they're designed primarily for caregivers and community members to support their students. Additionally, we have wonderful resources for you here as caregivers of Quincy Public School students. Your wonderful Thomas Crane Public Library has wonderful resources for students. The Massachusetts Literacy Guide has some great resources that I'm just going to show you quickly on supporting your students with comprehension, with digital media, with book lists, how you can utilize public libraries such as the Thomas Crane Library and build comprehension. And finally, your district uses Amplify CKLA for your elementary schools, and the Amplify CKLA has a caregiver hub that you can go to with resources to support your child's literacy as well. I know we are coming to the end of our time. I will stay on for any questions, but thank you so much for being here again and learning a little bit more just on supporting your child's literacy development. If you do have time, I ask that you fill out the survey. We as a research center take this very seriously, and we always try to adjust our presentations based on the feedback of our audience. And so I will just be putting this in the chat for you all to fill out. And if not, you can find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube, or email us at ncilliteracy@gmail.com. Thank you so much. And I will give it back over to Bridget to close us out for the night.
Thank you so much, Victoria. Thank you to all of our families that were able to join us tonight. As Victoria mentioned, we are here for any questions that you might have. We have a few minutes left here. And also, I want to thank some of our teachers are on tonight. So thank you. After a long day of teaching, thanks for joining us. And we have a school committee member, Mrs. Lebo, joined us tonight too. So I'm so thankful for that. And I appreciate mostly all of the families that are supporting their children. So I will stop talking, and you are welcome to leave the meeting. Again, this was recorded, the slides and the recording will be on our website. So you can check that out, or if you have friends and neighbors that were not able to join us, that'll be posted very, very soon. So thank you so much, but I will stop the recording and feel free to unmute or put any questions in the chat. Have a great night.